Welcome back to Watch the Bookerman and to the 6th episode of Paul Heyman's TNA 2010. We are of course back in the Impact Zone for tonight's show as we continue the build to Against All Odds, the second pay-per-view of the Paul Heyman era. And tonight's main event is a big one because it is the number one contendership match for AJ's title. The winner will face him at Against All Odds, and I think we've got four really strong contenders in that match, so it's going to be a good match for sure. Before we get into the show, I just wanted to mention that Roderick Strong has officially signed now with the company to a 1-year written deal. He actually signed the next day to a handshake deal to stay with Ring of Honor, so he's going to be working both at the time. I know that the companies didn't really do much business together, but this is a new day, so perhaps that door has been opened. And considering Roderick Strong was on his way to the top of Ring of Honor, it might be good to have him still with that promotion. As they build him up, he's only going to get more over, and he's actually with them for the better part of 2 years now. So Roderick Strong is on our roster though, definitely for the next year, and I'm really happy. If you look at his skills as well as that overness that I've already mentioned, he will be a really good addition to the company, but I don't think he's going to debut just yet. I'm going to wait until after Against All Odds so we can give him some proper spotlight and a strong debut. The idea that I have, I really like. Let's focus on the here and now and get into this 5th episode of TNA Impact for the save and continue the build, like I said, to Against All Odds. And the show begins with a video package recapping the pretty shocking end to last week's show. During the main event, it was quite a lot going on. Mr. Anderson walked out on Kurt Angle, leaving him to be pinned by Desmond Wolfe, who was teaming with Daniels in that main event. From there, AJ Styles came out to get his revenge on Wolfe, only to be laid out by him, Daniels and Tomko, who joined in. Samoa Joe then came down to make the save, but was himself then distracted as he looked to get his revenge on Daniels. Suicide came to the top of the ramp. The Masked Man finally revealed his identity as Kazarian returned to TNA. And at the time, it had been a couple of years since Kazarian had been seen. He'd previously quit TNA after having a little bit of a storyline where he was really struggling to pick up any momentum. I think it was, I can't 100% remember, but I'm going to do an interview with Kazarian explaining his time as Suicide and his return. So I'm going to look into the history a bit more, and we will have a sit-down interview between Kazarian and Mike Tenay at some point in the future, which I think will hopefully give us a bit more interesting backstory for Kazarian, who has returned and aligned himself with Tomko and Daniels. We then get a match between Abyss and Eric Young, which is for the TNA Global Championship, and it's a hardcore based match. I think I actually did it as a wild brawl, but it's a hardcore match, and we just want them to go out and start off the show with a 14-minute match going all out to just, it's again showing what we can do that WWE can't necessarily do or wouldn't necessarily do at this time, which is bringing maybe a bit of barbed wire, thumbtacks, all the chairs, tables, and having a chaotic open to the show. And while usually we might start with a promo or a little bit of a talking segment, we've gone straight into a highly intense hardcore match. Abyss picking up the win and retaining his TNA Global Championship, but a good match and good performances from both men, and I think it's a good different way to start the show. And hopefully if you turn on TNA Impact and see these two just beating the hell out of each other to start the show, I'd suggest that maybe you'd want to see the rest of the show and see what else can happen. So hopefully it's a good hook at the start of the show to keep people interested. And after the match, Abyss stands tall in the ring. The commentators are just putting over the violent brawl between the two as the global champion raises his title in the air. The World Elite and Eric Young have failed at every attempt to try and get one over on Abyss, and it seems like this is drawing a line under the storyline. They also question who will stop the monster. He has looked completely unstoppable since the beginning of the year. He's had to fight off 2, 3, 4 men at a time and has managed to come out on top every single time that's happened. So it's going to be a big moment, hopefully, when somebody finally does beat Abyss, and that is what we're doing, continuing to build Abyss up, looking undefeatable, that hopefully the person who does beat him and takes that global championship off him is going to get a really big boost to their perception and things like that. We then get a episode of Trash Talk with ODB. This is her talk show. I only think she did it a couple of times in reality, but it's a very tense edition as Angelina Love recently returned as her guest. Since Angelina's return, the beautiful people seem to have a new purpose. She's been able to refocus them, and that showed during ODB's rematch with Tara for the Knockouts title last week. ODB and Tara were attacked by all 4 members of the group. That match was thrown out, and that basically wasted ODB's rematch. So ODB and Love are understandably going back and forth. when Tara enters the room and she says that she is the surprise guest for tonight's show. Tara then gets in the face of Angelina Love, but ODB pushes her away because she was the one who was giving it out to Love. They both begin to argue between themselves because they both want to be the one to put down Angelina Love. Love says she's got better things to do and she'll see them next time. She's going, and when she sees Tara again, it will be to take her title. Angelina then leaves the interview set. ODB and Tara are still focusing on each other and bickering. Angelina and ODB both going off script well, but we're continuing the tensions between Tara and ODB. They're not just going to be friends now because they've got a common enemy. They still very, very much dislike each other, while Angelina Love is happy to take advantage of that. We then get a match between Hernandez and Morgan and Generation Me, two very, very different styles. Hernandez and Morgan win in 8 minutes and 23. We could say that there's an assist from Brian Kendrick and Paul London, who come out and try to give advice and tips to Nick and Matt Jackson, despite the fact that they said they didn't want any of their help. They didn't want to become the proteges of the Hooligans, but nonetheless, London and Kendrick come out and actually cause a distraction. Their intentions probably not as pure as they're trying to claim, because Kendrick and London clearly are not happy with the fact that Generation Me shunned them last week and weren't interested in their advice. After the match, the Hooligans on the outside begin to speak to Generation Me as they recover in the ring. London and Kendrick tell them if they had listened, they might not have lost that match. Generation Me clearly don't appreciate Lundrick getting involved and interfering is the point of this segment, and they walk off following a disappointing defeat. London and Kendrick are kind of playing oblivious, like, what's wrong with them, we were trying to help, but again, it's quite clear that they're getting under the skin of Nick and Matt Jackson and seemingly doing it on purpose. We then get a promo from D'Angelo Dinero, who is fired up. Last week, his return was ruined by Homicide jumping in from behind. Homicide is that loose cannon character, but it did seem that there was some kind of intent behind the assault. It wasn't just a case of Pope being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He calls Homicide out and says that he doesn't know what Homicide's problem with him is, but he can rest assured that Pope now has a problem with Homicide, and he tells Homicide that if he wants to fight, he will fight him any time. We then go into the second match of the night, which is another number one contendership match on the night. We've got two of them. There's also another match later, which I think this is a really, really strong match card, because we've got the Hooligans versus Beer Money later, which is a dream tag team match for me at this time. But the number one contendership to the Knockouts Tag Team Championship sees Madison Rayne and Velvet Sky steal the victory from Taylor Wilde and Sarita. They'd done the hard work, but Velvet Sky comes in and pins Daphne for the 1-2-3. Again, this is something that I always forget to change, but the default 2v2v2 in the game is an elimination match, so ignore that text on screen because it was a 1-4 match, regardless of what that says, because Daphne's the one getting pinned by Velvet Sky, and the Beautiful People are the number one contenders to Awesome Kong and Hamada, who, as Lacey Von Erich joins the Beautiful People in the ring, they come out, the Knockouts Tag Team Champions, facing off with the Beautiful People. The Beautiful People were in a great mood until Jimmy Jacobs led that group out. Hamada looks focused on the challenge ahead, while Awesome Kong has a sadistic look on her face. She wants to get her hands on the Beautiful People. A lot of history between her and that group. Jimmy Jacobs simply has a contented smile on his face. He is not feeling the threat of Rain and Sky to the Knockouts Tag Team Champions, and to look at them and to see their records recently, it's probably fair that Kong and Hamada are definitely the favourites going into that match. We then get a segment to end the first hour with Kurt Angle coming out from the back to address what happened with Mr. Anderson last week. He says that he's not surprised that Anderson has an issue with him, he headbutted him, but he asks why Anderson couldn't just say that to his face. Kurt wants Anderson to come out and explain why he went to all the trouble of teaming with him in the main event, going through all of that match, only to drop off the apron and leave him when he needed him the most. Mr. Anderson actually comes up on the screen. Anderson says that he's not coming out to the ring because he knows that Kurt is prone to random acts of violence. He adds that he did what he did last week to teach Kurt Angle a lesson. He says that when he came to TNA, he was hoping to come and make a positive impact on the company, but when he crossed the line, all he got was a headbutt from Kurt Angle. But that headbutt made him realise something. Last week when he and Kurt were teaming, he learned exactly what type of fans TNA has. They and Kurt just wanted to act like nothing had happened. He thanks the fans for that. Anderson says that they've showed him what this place is all about. Angle is jealous that Anderson was brought in while Kurt is being pushed to the side. Everybody knows that Angle's best days are behind him, and Anderson intends to be the final shove that sends him into retirement. So a really good segment, only let down by the announcing, gaining heat to that storyline, and we are building to an Anderson-Kurt Angle match. Anderson basically turning heel in a way, Again, it's another one where it's a grey area. I'm trying to do a lot of storylines like that where you could see either side of the argument, because Mr. Anderson has every reason to be annoyed. He came in as a babyface. He was defending TNA against when Bobby Lashley was trying to leave the company, and then Kurt Angle headbutts him the night after the pay-per-view, or the episode after the pay-per-view, and now the fans seemingly didn't care when they teamed back up together. They thought everything was water under the bridge, whereas Anderson certainly didn't, and he is holding a grudge now against Kurt Angle, but also playing it that Kurt Angle is this bitter old jaded veteran. Anderson's coming in, obviously Paul Heyman on that first episode spoke to him within the office when he hadn't spoken to anybody else, so teasing the idea that Mr. Anderson is almost a little bit of a chosen one of Paul Heyman. I know that Anderson spoke in the past actually about when he came to TNA, Paul Heyman, who was unemployed by any wrestling company at that time, was actually giving him ideas and helping him work on his storylines and segments. So it shows that there's definitely a relationship between them two. And again, we're going to lean into real life stuff whenever we can during this, without going into anything shooty or breaking kayfabe or anything like that. But definitely Anderson has a relationship with Paul Heyman, and we're going to play into that, while Kurt Angle has the storyline ongoing, of course, where he almost feels like Paul Heyman's trying to push him out. Again, of course, couldn't be further from the truth. He is going to be a mainstay of the roster for as long as he can still go in the ring, and for as long as he is willing to stay. I wouldn't be surprised if WWE try and sign him away from us when it's available, but that's, again, a bridge that I'll cross when I come to it. We then kick off the second hour with an interview. Desmond Wolfe is talking about how this match tonight in the main event is simply a formality. It'll be Desmond Wolfe, Samoa Joe, Mr. Anderson and Kurt Angle. Anderson and Kurt have their own little Barney to deal with, he says, and Samoa Joe, he's more interested in playing fancy dress with Frankie Kazarian. As he says this, Joe walks in on the interview and he tells Wolfe to watch his mouth. Joe has a Feast or Fired briefcase, but he can keep that for insurance. Tonight, he's going to earn the right to face AJ Styles against all odds, and they are going to steal the show. Both guys doing really, really well, improvising without a script. 73 rated segment is really good for them too, actually, as we go into the first match of the second hour. A decent match saw Amazing Red and Motor City Machine Guns, the X Division and Tag Team Champions, defeat three members of the World Elite who have very much a jobber stable at the minute. I'll either need to disband them or really rework what we're doing with them, but at the minute, we're just using them to give people fairly easy wins. It's only a 7-minute 24 match, and Amazing Red pins Sheikh Abdul Bashir with a Hurricane Runner driver. Sabin, Shelley and Red all putting in good performances. Abdul Bashir decent, the other two a little below what we'd hoped for, and it's not really a very good match, understandably, because it's basically a glorified squash match and quite obvious who was going to win it. But after the match we get a segment which begins something that I think could be interesting. Amazing Red and Motor City Machine Guns stand tall together in the ring, raising their titles up in unison. The celebration is cut short, however, as Tracy Brooks, of all people, comes down to the ring. She walks by Sabin and Shelley and has her eye on Amazing Red. She gives him a piece of paper, and Taz wonders if Red may have just found himself a replacement manager. Of course, we dropped Don West as his ringside cheerleader, so maybe Tracy is here to offer her services. Taz says that there's no way that he'd say no if Tracy offered her services to him, but that isn't what the contract's about. Instead, it is a challenge to an X Division Championship match fought against all odds. Tracy tells Red not to worry, this isn't a challenge from her, but she does suggest that Red does this the easy way, because if he doesn't, things may take a bad turn. Tracy Brooks then heads up the ramp. Amazing Red reads the contract, but an ominous warning from Brooks. Will he accept this challenge without knowing the opponent? Will he ask for more information? We'll find out on next week's Impact. But before the fifth match of the night, the commentators promote a number one contenders tag team match next week with Lethal Consequences after their win last week over British Invasion, Morgan and Hernandez after their win over Generation Me earlier in the night, and the winner of the following contest between the Hooligans and Beer Money. Whoever wins that match next week, the three-way tag team match, which I might actually do as an elimination match, whoever wins that match will face the Motor City Machine Guns at Against All Odds. And it's the Hooligans who pick up the victory over Beer Money in 11 minutes and 44. It's a 59 rated match. Decent performances. Paul London again a little bit below, but I do think he'll be up there in time. We just need to continue to build them up, and this will do them no harm at all. Picking up a victory over Beer Money in 11 minutes 44, and it says he used a foreign object, but he didn't. It's a handful of tights. Kendrick rolls up Robert Roode and he's pulling on the tights. So again, we're further pushing that heelish side to Paul London and Brian Kendrick's characters. I do think that they were popular figures at this time, but I've got an idea of where I want them to go in storyline. I think with Motor City Machine Guns and Generation Me as the young teams who can probably do more than them in the ring in terms of flips and flashy moves, The Hooligans then have to find their own niche, and I think that's going to be an almost bitter veteran type team. Seems a bit silly considering they're both young, but they were a little bit jaded at this time. I've seen some shoots they did at the time, which I found really entertaining when I was watching them, but they had a lot of negative things to say, and we're going to play that into their characters, that they are a little bit bitter about their time with WWE. We're not going to mention that, but it's all going to play into why they are where they are psychologically in this company. Lauren Brooke then looks to get a word with the Hooligans after the match about a potential rematch with the Motor City Machine Guns. They've just beaten Beer Money, and if they win next week, they will get a shot at Against All Odds. The Hooligans put over their victory and say that even though kids like Generation Me are already too smart to listen to them, they've just showed them how it's done tonight, and they'll show them how it's done again next week. Beer Money, who are heading to the back, don't like the sound of this and confront London and Kendrick, clearly unhappy with the methods they used during the match, only for them to go and gloat afterwards like they did something great when actually they cheated. James Storm tells them that they'll get nowhere in TNA if they carry on like this, and Robert Roode tells them that there's no place in the locker room for guys like these. London and Kendrick blow them off, however. They're not interested in getting lectured by Beer Money. They've been there and done that, and they don't need to be told what to do by these two. All four men improvising well in a good post-match segment, better than the match, and really happy with that overall. Then we go into a promo from AJ Styles, and he's just hyping up the #1 contendership match up next in the main event. He puts over the merit of facing any of those competitors involved, because all he wants to do is face the very best contender that TNA has to offer. He'll keep his close eye on that main event match, because he can't wait to get back in the ring Against All Odds. So not much to that promo there, but it's a decent rating as we go into that main event, which gets a 73, so we should be happy with the overall rating, and it should increase our popularity, I think, because we've had a couple of good segments on the show as well. Angle, of course, head and shoulders. He's absolutely brilliant and far and away the best member of the roster in terms of his ratings. The rest all around a similar level. Anderson not doing too well, and Desmond Wolfe really off his game, which is disappointing to see, but the match did get the crowd buzzing, and it is actually the man who was off his game who picks up the victory. During the match, Anderson and Angle, like I said, are a little bit on their own island. They're fighting each other. They're very, very personal, and actually towards the end, they do something on the outside that takes both of them out. Maybe a big angle slam that lays them both out, or an angle slam, and then Joe's able to take Angle out. The point being, we end up with just Joe and Desmond Wolfe in the ring. When it's just them two, remember there's no DQ in a match like this. Suicide pops up on the apron, not Kazarian, actually in the full Suicide garb. Joe goes towards him, but then on the other side of the apron, Kazarian pops up. So that isn't Kazarian under the Suicide mask. Joe sort of looks to both of them. Suicide unmasks, and it's Daniels. He laughs at Samoa Joe. He's duped him again and throws the mask in Joe's face. Joe then turns into a jawbreaker lariat from Desmond Wolfe. So Daniels and Kazarian continuing the mind games against Joe and costing him the chance to face AJ Styles in the main event of Against All Odds. Desmond Wolfe, of course, standing tall, having his arm raised as the winner. Another questionable finish to a main event. I think it's been 3 in a row now where I've had screwy finishes, so we are going to try and move away from having so many questionable finishes, but I feel like with all the storylines going on, everybody's getting involved with everybody. I don't see a reason why Daniels wouldn't try and screw over Samoa Joe. I don't see a reason why Anderson wouldn't have dropped off, so I feel like they were all logical reasons, but we do need to start setting up some main events where we can get clean, decisive finishes, because I think it's important that we don't train the viewer to think that, oh, it's a main event, it's going to have a screwy finish, and if we're going to put big matches on, we do need to make them more decisive in general, or just avoid doing big matches and saving them for the pay-per-views. Nonetheless, Desmond Wolfe, like I said, standing tall in the ring, not interested in Daniels and Kazarian's mind games. They're off back on their own thing. He's not part of that group as we did. He was associated with them last week, but he very much cut off from him. Wolfe is doing his own thing. AJ Styles quickly comes out as Wolfe celebrated. He failed to get his revenge, if you remember, after last week's main event, but he is dead set on it this time. But Wolfe spots AJ coming, and at the last moment, as AJ enters the ring, Desmond rolls out and heads up the ramp. AJ then stands tall to end the show. Desmond Wolfe heading for higher ground. He's at the top of the ramp. AJ Styles in the ring. Champion and challenger face off. The main event of Against All Odds set. AJ Styles defending the World Heavyweight Championship against Desmond Wolfe. The performance of AJ Styles good, and it's a solid ending to the show, advancing the storyline, and I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be an excellent main event to Against All Odds. Hopefully Wolfe isn't off his game like he was tonight. I know AJ's been getting like around the 80s. If we can get Wolfe up to a 75, I think it's going to be a strong main event, and I think in terms of the storyline, Wolfe getting that title shot, which is all he's been after since he came to TNA. Who knows, he might be the man to take the title off AJ Styles. I have had a few comments actually suggesting that Wolfe could be the next World Heavyweight Champion, so we'll see how that goes against all odds. But it's a 65 rating, increasing our popularity in 31 regions, so we continue to do good things. And for now, I'm going to be happy with ratings like that. In the future, we want to be getting in the 70s, 80s and beyond. But for now, we're increasing popularity, certainly maintaining our popularity, and so far everything is going as I'd hoped. Maybe the game will throw a spanner in the works at some point, but for now I'm really happy with the first couple of months that we've done, or the first month really. Kurt Angle doesn't like Matt Jackson. I don't think we can write him off just yet. We'll look at the ratings. Actually, we've gone over 1 million for the first time, so I'm going to actually look at the TV ratings. Actually, I'll go through all the top 100s actually just to end this episode. TNA Genesis was our best show so far, which is what you want. You want your pay-per-views to be the best ones. But I really do like looking through these top 100s and stuff. I think when you get deep into a save, it's really good to see if there is like a clear progression, or maybe we'll get a few months in and Genesis is still the standard bearer, and that'll tell me that I'm not doing a particularly good job. But AJ and Kurt, the main event of Genesis, it's really good so far to see that the most important match is the best match. Like the two TNA World Heavyweight Championship matches we've had have been our best two matches, and that is exactly what you want. Also a sign that AJ is doing really well. No real notes for the attendances because we're always selling out the Impact Zone just because we're more popular on it. Not a very good buy rate, but as we can see actually, is this our first Impact then? Yeah, so the first Impact got a little bit of a ratings pop, which is what we wanted by design. We put a 3-hour show, we put all the titles on the line, so we were definitely trying to get a big rating there. So I'm really liking this. It feels like a fairly accurate representation of how things should be. TNA were getting a little bit more than 1 million, but the idea of Paul Heyman coming in and getting rid of some of them names and seeing a little bit of a ratings, I like that as the story, the save, that actually we've took TNA backwards a little bit from what they were getting in reality, but I do think that in the future we're going to be far much higher and it's going to reap the rewards. So in terms of the storyline of the save, in a way, I do think that this has been a really good start, and maybe Spike TV executives and Dixie Carter are concerned about the decision at the moment, but I do definitely think it's going to reap the benefits long term, especially with the likes of Roderick Strong coming in, who is going to be a huge addition to this roster.